giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Yes, the government may be shut down, but the Bill Press Show is fired up. In fact, this morning I was coming in, I thought there could be a fire here in the building, alarms just going off. But I've been assured we're safe. There is no fire. That if there is, the danger is just out of Trump from the White House or something like that. Anyway, my name is Igor Volsky. I am here for Bill Press. Thank you so much for being here. It's always so good to be back here in the studio, especially with the wonderful team of Peter Ogburn and Ray Rogers. And Peter, being back now, when I came in, we haven't seen each other, I feel, in like 6 months.
It's been a long time,
because he's been dodging me, and that's fine.
It's true. The last couple of times you've been here, I've been gone.
You have been gone. Well, I'm glad.
Well, that was by design.
I thought it was no coincidence, and I was surprised to see you. I thought you'd use the fire as an excuse to be like, your building is burning.
That was my last attempt to try and get out of seeing you, but here we are. Here we are. Hello, Igor.
We had great fun this morning, not just because Peter finally decided to see me, but also we were reliving the audio from this past weekend, and we're going to play a lot of it for you here this morning of Donald Trump trying to get off this sinking ship of a government shutdown and explain why the government is still shut down in order to build a wall that he said Mexico would pay for, that he's now asking money for, while at the same time claiming that Mexico would still pay for it. It's all very confusing, but we'll break it down to you with great guests and the sharpest analysis in the business. But first,
this is the Full Court Press.
Just a couple of other stories making news. Okay, I got lots of details here on the Golden Globes.
Oh, tell me.
The Golden Globes were last night. I think it's safe to say that the Green Book, the movie Green Book, did quite well. I'm just going to
surprising everybody.
Yeah, right.
Because the family disputes all of this. We'll get into this later.
All right, let me just run through some of the winners, because the Golden Globes, they have different categories for Best Motion Picture. Best Motion Picture Drama, Bohemian Rhapsody. Best Motion Picture Musical or Comedy was Green Book. Best Performance by an Actress in a Motion Picture Drama, Glenn Close for The Wife. Best Performance by an Actor Motion Picture Drama, Rami Malek for Bohemian Rhapsody. Also, Christian Bale won for Vice. Have you seen Vice yet?
I have not. I didn't get good reviews. Did you see it? I have not heard good things.
I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it a lot. Best Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role in Any Motion Picture, Mahershala Ali for Green Book, and Best Screenplay for Motion Picture also went to Green Book. So that was the big winner at the Golden Globes last night.
Now I have to go see the Green Book, I suppose.
I haven't watched it.
You know what's
yet.
overlooked here?
Go ahead.
Can you please forgive me? The Melissa McCarthy movie, I saw it last night. It is excellent.
Oh, did you think?
Melissa McCarthy's best performance that I've seen her in, easily.
I have not watched it. I have it at home because we get these screeners. We vote for the SAG-AFTRA Awards because we're union strong, of course. I don't know if I'm going to watch that movie.
I recommend it. I really do. It puts you in the kind of mood that good, strong performances leave you with.
Okay.
Strongly recommend it.
All right. Are you a Disney file? Do you like going to Disney parks?
I've only been once. It rained.
Some people are into it. Disneyland Resorts, actually, over the weekend announced that they are raising their prices yet again. By the way, for daily tickets, annual passes, and parking, they are raising it as much as 25%. Ooh. This is less than a year, by the way, after they raised the prices for the resort 18% a year ago. So the cheapest daily ticket will cost you more than $100. Daily parking prices are up to $25.
Oh my.
Used to just cost $20 to park. They said that this is actually, but one of the reasons that they're doing it is for crowd control, to try and keep people out.
Oh, well, look, it's so popular, people can't get enough.
That's right.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Good morning. The Bill Press Show for this Monday, January 7th, 2019. I'm Igor Volsky, filling in for Bill Press as we enter day 17 of the partial federal government shutdown. The president over the weekend, oh my, trying to give you the sense that he was compromising on this wall, saying it no longer has to be concrete, that he's fine now with steel planks. What does that mean, and will that get us any closer to a solution? I don't think so, but we'll get into that. Also, amazing audio from Friday's Rose Garden press conference that the president held. I don't know if you caught it. We'll play that for you. The president's press secretary, Sarah Sanders, also appeared on Fox News Sunday, where Chris Wallace, who, I've claimed, I think, on this show and in all other locations publicly, that he's the best Sunday news interviewer because he does his research and he asks the smart questions. And he did that again yesterday, embarrassing Sarah Sanders, I thought. And then Elizabeth Warren, the second or the third Democrat who said she's exploring her run. She went to Iowa, lost her voice, but I thought sounded good. We'll play some of that for you as well. But first, let's talk a bit about the Golden Globes. They were on last night on CBS with Sandra Oh and what's his name, Andy Samberg from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I think is a wonderful show. Hosted the ceremony. I did not watch it because the only award shows I like are the entertaining ones, like the Grammys, which I will watch when I think they're on in February. So please have me back so I can talk about that. I didn't even watch many of the movies, but I'll give you some of the winners in case you're wondering. And Peter, feel free to jump in here. I don't know how much of these you've seen. Peter gets these screeners that he was just bragging to me about. They do come on DVDs, which I felt was a little awkward.
Well, I will say some of them come on DVDs. We also have a streaming app set up just for voting.
How do I get in on this?
Well, you got to join the SAG-AFTRA union, Igor.
The AFTRA union? What do you mean the AFTRA union?
The SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild.
Oh, actor. I thought you were saying SAG-AFTRA. Okay.
SAG-AFTRA. AFTRA.
Oh.
They merged, you understand.
I don't know what any of that
so
means.
it represents movie actors and radio talent.
Is that what you consider yourself to be?
So we get to vote in the SAG-AFTRA Awards, which means we get a lot of these screeners that are so popular during the awards.
When are these awards?
I believe. Well,
and does anybody watch them?
Wow, how dare you? Voting in.
Have you even seen one?
January 25th. I think the awards are January 27th. That's just off the top of my head, so I could be wrong. But we get to see all the good movies.
I don't know.
In the comfort of our own home.
Yeah, see, I don't know how real that award show sounds, but the Golden Globes, which people consider real, is decided by like 100 foreign press people you've never heard of from publications that aren't like major publications in those countries, but are tiny little outlets. And so the stars wine and dine the foreign press corps in order to get these awards. And based on yesterday's results, the people who did the wining and dining, the most wining and dining, actually lost.
Yeah.
Like Lady Gaga lost.
Oh, Lady Gaga did
not win.
Did you see A Star Is Born?
I did. I thought it was awful.
Okay.
First of all, let's say two things. One is it's been done before. We don't need a fifth version.
Understood.
Second, why is it like 2 hours? They could have comfortably cut 40 minutes out of that movie. And third, we all knew where it was going, and we just wanted to get there faster. And Lady Gaga was fine, but she was playing a version of herself. I was not impressed.
I did not watch that movie. I am not going to watch that movie.
And yet he's a voter on this thing that he's going to vote for. See, fake.
Sorry.
Fake. This is another fake award show.
Not nominated for the SAG.
Oh, it's not?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, it was
Which means maybe we have a little bit better discerning taste.
It was the lead-in favorite going into last night, but it lost to Bohemian Rhapsody for Best Picture. Bohemian Rhapsody won, A Star Is Born lost. Lady Gaga also was supposed to be the favorite to win Best Performance by an Actress in a Motion Picture. She lost that as well to Glenn Close. from The Wife, a wonderful book and an excellent movie. Now, I have not seen Bohemian Rhapsody, although I do enjoy a good Queen. Have you seen it?
I like Queen. I don't think I have the movie at home. I don't know if I'm going to watch it. Just doesn't appeal to me.
I think it may be a good movie to watch in a theater setting, in the grand theater setting.
Sure.
But, my boyfriend has a mustache like Freddie Mercury.
Well, then.
Whose name, and we call the mustache Freddie.
Oh.
And so I don't feel like I need to watch the movie.
You have to watch it now. You have to watch it now.
But the music is good, and I heard good things. So maybe I'll see it. And then there's, of course, the movie The Green Book, which came out of nowhere, I thought.
Your grandparents love it.
Great, so it's your age demographic. Perfect.
Whoa.
Best Motion Picture, Musical Comedy, Green Book, the winner. People were predicting Crazy Rich Asians, which was of course, a huge hit, which I didn't like either. But The Green Book is a movie roiled in controversy, Peter. I don't know if you know this.
I'm familiar with it.
That the family of this musician, it's a movie, it's kind of a Driving Miss Daisy in reverse, where an African-American musician has to tour the South. He plays jazz, and so he hires a white driver to take him around to these concerts. I haven't seen any of it, but according to the family, the son of this musician, who's one of the main stars, the whole movie is a relationship between this musician and his white driver. The family doesn't remember this driver. And the family did not give permission to this movie maker to make this movie, yet here it is, winning awards left and right. This shocked me that it won.
That's pretty shady.
Shady, right?
Yeah, it feels pretty shady.
But maybe I'll see it. It looks, kind of like that, a close bond between two people, close friendship kind of movie.
They're both excellent actors, Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali. Can you say his name?
Peter, don't
I'm sorry, that was me.
It's only 7:12 in the morning, right?
That was me. I think they're both wonderful actors, but I just have zero interest in that movie. It looks like a grandparents' movie.
And then, look, the other thing I'm going to mention, and then I promise we will move on. And I hope there's some kind of applause sound that you can play on the board or something as I announce this next category. Because for me, Peter, this show has been an underdog for so many years. I've watched it through all of its seasons from the very beginning. It's more appropriate now than ever before. I'm talking, of course, about the winner of Best TV Series Drama. Drum roll, please. No drum roll. I'll take the applause when I announce it. It was The Americans. Finally recognized for the quality A+ entertainment it provided now for all 6 years.
Wait, are you taking credit for it somehow? You seem to be invested.
Look, I'll just say, Peter, that I've occasionally tweeted about The Americans.
Well,
and
you've done your part.
It may or may not be a coincidence that they are now Golden Globe winners. The Americans, a terrific show. If you haven't seen it, it's not too late to start.
I watched an episode.
It's haunting how appropriate it is now. And the last season, particularly that last episode, was really some of the best writing and acting I've seen on television.
It's over now, right?
It's over now.
The series is
complete. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10. Get your friends together and check this show out. But hey, what did you think of the Golden Globes? Did you watch it? Do you agree with the winners? Let me know at Igor Volsky on Twitter, at BP Show. But always fun, I think, to go through some of this stuff. And I think it, puts into perspective and kind of fills life out a little bit for the seriousness that we're going to get into now. And that is, of course, the mess that Donald Trump has made. Now, last weekend this past weekend was my birthday weekend. No applause there, I guess.
Happy birthday.
And thank you so much. I only tweeted about it 3 times, so I'm sure.
No, you're that guy.
I try to keep it in. I don't want any of the attention.
Come on.
3 times, Peter. But once, I don't know if you saw the last time, but the last time, my boyfriend Pete he sent me these edible arrangements to my office. It was very sweet of him. And
I love edibles.
Well, I know you do. These arrangements were chocolate-covered strawberries, which were delicious because the chocolate was so thick.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
That's the key to
the thickness of the chocolate predicts how good
absolutely
the fruit's going to be.
That's correct.
And attached to these edible arrangement strawberries were balloons, happy birthday balloons. And so when I walked back from the office, I attached the balloons to my dog Dima, and he was Balloon Dog. And you should see, I wish you could have seen people on the street walking by us, the smiles that filled their faces from cheek to cheek, how happy they were to see Balloon Dog. And this is what I do. I bring joy to people's lives.
What on earth?
Well, listen, you can check it out at Igor Volsky or Igor Volsky Graham on Instagram. I just got to plug it all. I got to plug it all.
Wow.
But I tell you this because I had a bit of a surprise party on Saturday for my birthday, and I saw an old friend, an old college friend who works for the federal government. And I asked him, how are you doing? He was furious, Peter. He didn't want to talk about it. It brought the whole party down. The whole party, I brought up the shutdown. The whole party was just like depressed. He's not getting paid. He's worried about having to get a second job. He doesn't know how long this is going to last. I mean, this thing is really impacting people. 800,000 federal workers, at least, are impacted. And of course, it's not what Trump says, because on Friday, he held a news conference at the Rose Garden where reporters asked him, what is he going to do for the 800,000 federal employees who aren't getting paid? What is he going to do? How do they feel about this? According to our president, the federal workers, they love the shutdown.
A lot of people that you think are upset, and certainly they're not thrilled, but they say, sir, do the right thing. We need border security.
That is not what my friend said at all, believe it or not.
Oh, that's weird.
That's weird. It didn't line up. It did not line up. And this here is the funniest clip. We know Donald Trump likes to name everything. He likes to brand things. Here he is explaining on Friday that he doesn't really call it a shutdown. He calls it something else.
I'm very proud of doing what I'm doing. I don't call it a shutdown. I call it doing what you have to do for the benefit and for the safety of our country.
Wow, that has such a ring to it. So catchy.
Right? Yeah.
What a master brander.
The country has entered a period where we're doing what we have to do for the national security of our country. Really fits into a bumper sticker.
I call it doing what you have to do for the benefit and for the safety of our country.
Now,
Just rolls right off the tongue.
Rolls right off the tongue. Democrats and Republicans have been meeting for days to try to find a solution to reopen the government. You know the basics. The president is requesting $5.6 billion for a wall. It started out as a concrete wall on the southern border. Now, he said yesterday, he's fine with steel plates, which he says are both stronger and better.
I informed my folks to say that we'll build a steel barrier. Steel. It'll be made out of steel. It'll be less obtrusive and it'll be stronger.
And the ploy here seems to be to manufacture some kind of movement on the president's part. Mick Mulvaney, the acting deputy, whatever he is, chief of staff in the White House, went on the Sunday talk shows today to explain that if that's what Democrats want, steel instead of concrete, then that's what the White House will do.
We didn't make much progress at the meeting, which was surprising to me. I thought we had come in to talk about terms that we could agree on.
Yes, so it's their fault, I guess.
This was their fault. So here's where we are. So the president is now asking for $5.6 billion to fund now a steel wall along the southern border. Democrats, particularly in the House, voted last week to reopen the government, approving a piece of legislation that was approved by unanimous consent in the Senate late last year. They are willing to offer some $3 billion for border security measures that do not include specific wall funding. So that's the standstill, and that's what the negotiators are trying to figure out. The president, however, on Friday threw another wrench into these negotiations by claiming that he has executive authority to build the wall if he wants to. He doesn't need Congress.
The military is very affected. We may use the military for parts of it. Homeland Security obviously is very affected. We may, in addition to the 5.6, we will use Homeland Security funds. So we have things happening in addition to the 5.6, but we have to get a structure built.
Now, he also says that he's considering declaring a national emergency in order to use his executive authority to build the wall himself.
I may declare a national emergency dependent on what's going to happen over the next few days.
And this, of course, is controversial. Democrats themselves are divided. On Sunday, Democrats took to the talk shows. Some argued that he does have the authority to declare a national emergency and to construct a wall, while others said he does not. Either way, Peter, this is going to be challenged in court, I'm sure.
Yeah, I want to play a clip really quick. I didn't have time to play this for you before. Professor Matthew Dallek from George Washington University knows about these laws, and he said this is going to be extremely difficult for Donald Trump to pull off.
My sense is that it'll be extremely difficult to do. It'll be politically unpopular, and it is very possible that the courts will step in and say you can't do it because Congress didn't appropriate the money for it.
And he also talks about sort of the different challenges that Trump might face.
Even if he was able to argue that, okay, he declares a national emergency, he says, let's build the wall. I found the money within the budget already. The wall is not going to happen, obviously, overnight. This will be immediately challenged in court.
Yeah, immediately challenged in court, I'm sure. And then this is really something. Then on Sunday, the president spent some time in Camp David. I think this is him probably coming back to the White House. He explained that this is really that the reason why folks are coming into the country, the reason why we need a wall on the southern border is because of the great economy that Donald Trump has created and has built. So he's really, you see, a victim of his own success.
A lot of that is my fault. You know why? Because I've created such a great economy that people are pouring up to try and get jobs. So you could say it's my fault. And I want people to come in, but they have to come in legally.
They have to come in legally.
Excellent humble brag.
Excellent humble brag. We'll get into that, by the way, with our next guest. So where we stand now is negotiations are still ongoing. The president is floating the possibility of using his national emergency powers to build the wall himself, while Republicans on the Hill, at least some of them who are up for re-election in 2020, are having second thoughts. I'm talking, of course, about Maine Senator Susan Collins, Colorado Senator Cory Gardner, and Tom Tillis from North Carolina. I always get those two. North Carolina, raising concerns about continuing the shutdown for so long. Mitch McConnell, by the way, nowhere to be seen in any of this, and insists that he won't bring a measure to the Senate floor unless it has the backing of the president.
I mean, look, I don't want to give Mitch McConnell much credit, right? But he is right in the sense that they could go ahead and they can pass this and nothing's going to happen. So I understand.
Well, but if they have a veto-proof majority,
they're not going to get a veto-proof majority, and you know that.
And the reason for that...
They could, and they should. And I'm not trying to defend his actions. I'm just saying this is all sort of getting in this area of futile actions, right? Because Donald Trump will seemingly shoot it down. And
well,
so their hands are a little tied.
I think there's a power in Congress standing up to the executive.
I agree with that, 100%.
And if Republicans in Congress thought that the tide was turning for Trump politically and for how the base saw Trump, then maybe they would do that. But for them, it's a careful calculus. You look at a state like Kentucky, McConnell's home state, where he's going to be running for re-election in 2020. Trump's approval ratings with Republicans are north of 80%. Those are still big numbers. And so The fear that McConnell has, certainly in the short term, is a primary challenge in the mold of Trump, preventing him from even getting to November 2020. That's a real fear and a real calculation that he and many other Republicans have. Now, they may certainly have longer-term concerns about what this shutdown and how the president is handling this shutdown, what it's going to do to the Republican Party in 5, 10, 15 years. But those concerns, I think, are secondary, are on the back burner to their immediate, what they see on the horizon as a real political vulnerability. And that is so long as the Trump base and the base of the Republican Party is behind this, they're kind of boxed in, I guess, at least if they think about it politically. But folks are asking questions, and even on Fox News, Chris Wallace really pushed back against White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders. Now, you know the line that the Trump administration has been using, that because of their stepped-up operations on the border, they've been able to intersect all of these terrorists or terrorist suspects, and that's why they argue they need to go even further with the wall. It's an argument Sarah Sanders made yesterday with Chris Wallace, and he pushed back forcefully.
We know that roughly nearly 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally. And we know that our most vulnerable point of entry is at our southern border.
I know this statistic. I didn't know if you were going to use it, but I studied up on this. Do you know where those 4,000 people come, or where they're captured? Airports.
Not always, but certainly a large number.
The State Department says there hasn't been any terrorists that they found coming across the southern border from Mexico. It's by air, it's by land, and it's by sea.
She talks over him a little bit there, but that's an important point. The State Department says there have been no terrorists intercepted at the southern border of the United States. Not one. Not one.
Which, of course, begs the question, where is the national emergency, Mr. President? Well, we'll get into the wall and into the case for the wall, the case against the wall in just a second. But let's quickly go to a clip here of Chuck Schumer. This is from Friday. His summary of how the negotiations to reopen the federal government have been going with the president.
He said, I demand it my way, $5.6 billion for a big concrete wall, and the government could be shut down for months or even years. Everyone, Democrats and Republicans, were sort of aghast when he said it.
Months or even years. What does this mean, of course, for the 800,000 federal workers? It's a long time to not get a paycheck. The president, by the way, on Friday at the Rose Garden was saying that, well, you know, their employers would find some flexibility and everyone's going to be so flexible and it's no big deal.
That's not how this works.
Folks have nothing to worry about. Pelosi, though, really described, I think, the consequences of the shutdown. This is also from Friday. Pelosi explaining how Americans are suffering.
Services are being withheld from the American people. Paychecks are being withheld from people who serve the needs of the American people. And our border security will suffer if we do not resolve this issue.
Our border security will suffer if we do not resolve this issue. How ironic, right, for a president who ran on border security, who has shut down the government because of border security, who claimed during the campaign that Mexico will pay for the wall, who's now demanding we pay for the wall, while at the same time claiming Mexico will still pay for the wall. By the way, I don't know if you caught this on Friday. His explanation for how Mexico is paying for the wall is through this new trade deal that he's negotiated. And, you know, Peter, you know that I can't do math, don't understand numbers.
It's true.
I'm still unsure of how math works.
It's true.
But even I know that a savings is not the same thing as having money in the bank to pay for something. I may have learned that the hard way once or twice or 3 or 4 or 5 times, but it's not the same thing. Yet the president's argument was because America is going to see some kind of saving from this new renegotiated trade deal, which, by the way, people are saying is just like NAFTA.
People are saying.
Some people say. and that those savings are going to pay for the wall time and time and time again. It's shocking. The other piece here, Democrats in the latest round of negotiations, I think either Sunday, yesterday, or on Saturday, asked for an actual plan from the administration of how they were going to spend the $5.6 billion that they were asking for the rationale behind that money, and the administration couldn't provide it to them. That they just kept saying that that's the number the administration wants, but there was no plan for how that money was actually going to be used. And for a party that, I mean, we remember this over the last 8 years, cried about big government and out of control spending and how much money President Obama was spending, for them to just go along with a $5.6 billion appropriation without any justification, without any kind of detail for how that money is going to be used, is really just absolutely shocking to me. The last thing before we move on here quickly is Rashida Tlaib, right, the new member from Michigan. You all, I think, know now the comments she made earlier last week at the Move On party right after the swearing in.
We're going to impeach the mother.
I think this was actually on my birthday, by the way, that she made those comments. I don't understand, A, why this is controversial, B, why this is a news story, particularly in the era of Trump. It's how many people feel. She's representing the feelings of millions of Americans, and that's okay. We can talk about that publicly, and I don't see any problem. And in an era when Trump uses all kinds of language, all kinds of derogatory phrases to describe people, the fact that we're still so outraged and grasping our pearls about how disgusting it is that anybody would use a word like that is baloney. I refuse to engage in it.
There were a lot of journalists out there telling on themselves by acting outraged. Outraged.
How could she?
Over these comments.
By the way, I thought Democrats on the Sundays handled this well. They said they don't see a problem with it, and they're going to wait for Mueller to talk about impeachment and see if it's a possibility. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to talk more about the wall, border security, shutdown, and where we go from here. I'm Igor Volsky, filling in for Bill Press. Stay with us.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning.
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you eat stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay, but remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
I spy something beginning with S.
Snow?
No.
Snow-covered trees?
Nothing to do with snow.
Head outside to discover incredible animals and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure.
Wow.
So grab your loved ones.
Don't even.
And explore a world of possibilities.
Come on, this way.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Igor Volsky filling in for Bill Press, and we move now to a conversation about what does the wall mean? What does Trump want to do to border security? With Scott Shuchart, he's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. Scott, welcome to the show. Yeah. So the thing that really shocks me, or not shocks me, but I think surprises me, is that if you talk to immigration hardliners, they will tell you that the wall isn't even a top priority for them, right? That they want to see legal immigration brought down significantly, that they want E-Verify, they want a lot of other changes than a physical structure on the southern border. Yet this is obviously an issue that the president campaigned on, that became a rallying cry at his rallies, and that he's now clearly championing. So on the very right of the immigration debate, you have organizations saying, actually, we have other priorities, Mr. President. And then obviously on the left, you have folks saying, this isn't who we are. This doesn't reflect our values and the kind of democracy that we want to build. And it's a dynamic that, how does Trump even get out of?
I don't know. There's nobody who thinks that the wall is important. Look, there are places where the wall makes a lot of sense.
Maybe it's Ann Coulter, right? And Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh. Three.
But it was always a tool for them to manipulate Trump, right?
That's right.
There was Reminder reporting about this over the weekend. But the wall was something for him to cling to because he wouldn't look at note cards when he was doing rallies.
That's right. We should say this, that in 2014, this is the article you're referring to, I think, when he was considering running for president, his advisors wanted to find a way to remind him to come to always talk about immigration, to keep coming back to immigration. And they came up with this idea of a wall. They thought it would appeal to his sense of construction and building things and his background. And that's how the whole thing came about.
Yeah. And I mean, that seems to be the unstable equilibrium one right now, is where what he wants is something that nobody thinks is an optimal solution to any problem, which is why there's no way to kind of negotiate around it and why we're, I think, in the shutdown that we're in. So that's right. There are places where physical barrier makes some sense. Running through densely populated areas. We built all that, right? That was built mostly in the 90s. Where there would be totally new wall or fencing built is through the desert, through the middle of nowhere, or places where vehicle barriers is really all that anybody who cares about this and knows anything about it would want to put anything. So there's really not any call on the right or the left, as far as I can tell. There's no problem that would be solved by this other than maybe some what I would call psychiatric problems.
Well, let's just, maybe just put it out there more clearly. In policy terms, why is the wall bad policy? Why won't it keep people out of the United States?
Right. So there's the immigration reasons it's bad policy, and then the other reasons. I was actually involved in a lawsuit in the early aughts about an earlier wave of wall building. Some reasons that the wall is a bad idea, in addition to the kind of things about American identity and about why we wouldn't want to start dividing up our continent with physical barriers, are the environmental problems, the private property problems, the fact that there are parts of the border where you physically couldn't build it without cutting off parts of people's ranches, university campuses from their sports fields. Like, that's what the border is.
Oops.
Right. So there are lots of relevant to people who live near the border issues that are reasons not to build it. There are the sort of moral and ethical reasons not to build it. And then from the immigration side, there's it is a waste of money to achieve any immigration outcome that anybody would want to achieve. So the first thing to say is that the majority of people who come to the country and become undocumented immigrants now are coming as visa overstays.
What is it, over half are visa overstays?
Yeah, so we think that it's about 2/3 of the new undocumented population come out of overstays, and then about 45% of the aggregate. So if I can back up a little bit, like a lot of things, Donald Trump's understanding of illegal immigration is stuck around the period of his second marriage. So there was a huge wave of mostly Mexican working-age males who we expected to cross in the desert between ports of entry. We did very little to stop them. Hundreds of thousands of people a year, over 1 million in the year 2000, came to work informally, and we didn't do worksite enforcement. We didn't do anything to keep them from working because that's what we wanted in the economy. So that means that the stock of illegal immigrants, about 11 or 12 million, close to 11 million illegal immigrants, 2/3 to 80% of them have been here for more than 10 years. The illegal immigration problem, such as it is something that happened a long time ago and turned into a long-settled group of people who maybe have U.S. citizen children, who've married a U.S. citizen or somebody with status. So if you look at who are the undocumented immigrants in the country right now, they're largely people who came a long time ago to work when we tolerated that. What you're adding on top of that, as we were saying a minute ago, is mostly people who come here legally and then stay.
So this is interesting. I've not heard this history in quite this way, that in the early 2000s, we basically let these folks in. Say more about that. Why was that?
Well, I guess I'm showing my age here, but the idea was that Americans didn't want to do low-skilled, low-wage jobs, that a lot of the restaurant industry and the agricultural economy was sort of built on the idea of people coming, working, maybe in their late teens, in their 20s, doing work for low wages, that was low-skilled work that needed a lot of manual labor. And we didn't do worksite enforcement. We didn't do anything. And the expectation was people would come back and forth because the border was porous. If anything, what changed with the lockdown of the border starting in the Clinton and into the second Bush administrations was that it became less able for people to go back to their home countries and maintain families there. And so what you've seen in the last 15, 20 years is more women and more children coming, many because they're seeking asylum from very dire situations in their home countries, but sometimes also for family unification because it's no longer possible for the breadwinner to go back and forth to an agricultural job, a restaurant job.
So what is the extent of the security problems at the border? What should we be concerned about if you're advising folks on the Hill or lawmakers? Right. How valid are the comments Trump usually makes about terrorists coming in and other unwanted folks from all kinds of countries coming in?
Right. So those are great questions. The first thing to say is most of the problems on the southern border right now are things that the administration has contrived. They are causing fake crises by running the ports badly, by attempting illegally to keep people from seeking asylum if they cross between the ports of entry, and by mismanaging resources so that the people who do come, who are seeking asylum, don't have an appropriate process to feed into. They started doing this before the election. They started doing something called uncontrolled release, which was the idea that instead of taking families with children and either putting them in a family detention facility or putting them on a bus to another city where they would then check in with the ICE office and be under supervision, they were just turning them loose at the edge of the border, expecting, I think, for them to just walk up the highways towards Tucson or El Paso and precipitate a lot of visuals on the news that we were being invaded. Well, that didn't work, and then they happened to get the caravan thing. So they've been trying to precipitate an acute crisis for a number of months by mismanaging the situation. So that,
and you think they did this on purpose in order to create the pretext for what we see?
Sure. Why are they spending all this money on expanding adult detention beds so they can do more interior arrests when they don't have enough space in Border Patrol stations and processing stations? They don't have enough transportation capability to get people safely out of Border Patrol stations. They clearly have the resources. They have the ability to reprogram money within the department. They're not choosing to spend it on border-related security problems, which then leads to children dying in dirty Border Patrol stations and everything else. But I don't want to get away from the other piece of your question, which is, are there terrorist problems at the border? So far as I can tell, since the early 1970s, there have been 9 people who entered the country illegally who were later convicted of terrorist offenses. 3 of them entered the southern border as as children. They were Eastern Europeans, like Albanians or something, who came as children and later got radicalized. And then the other 6 came from the Canadian side, and that includes one guy who was in the process of being arrested at the port and then ran through it and got arrested. So technically he entered illegally in the sense that he entered like a few yards illegally in the process of being arrested. So there has never been any problem of terrorists crossing illegally the southern border.
Talking to Scott Shuchart, he's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and may have been Chris Wallace's research assistant for yesterday's show. Let's play that clip again, Peter, of Chris Wallace challenging White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders on the administration's claim that they've arrested, 400 people at the border.
We know that roughly nearly 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally. And we know that our most vulnerable point of entry is at our southern border.
I know this statistic. I didn't know if you were going to use it, but I studied up on this. Do you know where those 4,000 people come, or where they're captured? Airports.
Not always, but certainly a large number.
The State Department says there hasn't been any terrorists that they found coming across the southern border from Mexico.
It's by air, it's by land, and it's by sea.
It's by air, it's by land, it's by sea. It's like a little nursery rhyme they got
like a
going
board
on there.
game, yeah.
So, and what is driving this? Let's break that down. What is the intent of the administration in their border security policy?
I don't know how you talk about the administration as a single actor there, right? There's something that Stephen Miller and the other hardcore people seem to want. I think Jeff Sessions and some of the people who used to work for him want, which is an end to as much immigration as possible, right? I guess Secretary Nielsen once indicated that Norwegians would be okay. That was when she declined to admit that they were mostly white. The administration has a hardcore agenda of shutting down all immigration, including legal immigration, which is so important to driving growth in the economy. And they are trying, and have always been trying, to conflate illegal immigration, which is a tiny, tiny problem relative to what it was 15 years ago, with legal immigration. I know I heard a little bit on a segment earlier, the president saying he wants people to come here legally. There are not avenues for low-skilled people to come here legally and become Americans. We have a couple of small guest worker programs, but there isn't a thing. There isn't a line.
Very hard.
There isn't a line to get in. The other thing they want to do is deprive people of asylum and other humanitarian protections, the things that we committed to at the end of World War II as part of the modern world order. And I wonder if that is kind of a piece, both with their Nazi sympathies and with their attempt to disaffiliate from NATO and all the other institutions to keep the world together. They are not interested in upholding our international commitments, that if people are being persecuted on the basis of political opinion, if people are unsafe in their homes because the governments can't do anything for them, that when they get to a safe country, they'll be allowed to stay there and not be sent back to danger. They want to shut that down, and so that's why they're attempting a large number of actions, fortunately, that have really all been stalled in the courts because they're so patently illegal, to shut down the asylum and humanitarian protection system. So that seems to be what's going on, and I think through that lens, the pieces do kind of fit together in that they're all pushing in one direction towards keeping out people who who Congress has decided would have some ability to come here, either legally or, the asylum process is legal. It's not something we call in the trade legal immigration, but of course it is legal to show up at the border and claim asylum, and they're trying to shut all that down.
So now some piece of this must be rooted in some degree of racism. That is fairly clear from the comments this president has made, from the way he ran his campaign in 2016. But then the other argument that you hear the other side make is that having more immigrants come into the country takes jobs away from American-born workers, that somehow having immigrants in America makes America and natural-born Americans less prosperous or less well-off, and that is also untrue.
It is entirely untrue. I mean, it is one of those things that blurring the difference between legal and illegal immigration it makes the conversation confusing, but in some ways it's the only way to do it, because it's not as though illegal immigrants stay among, undocumented immigrants stay together. Like I said, they're in mixed status families.
Yeah.
You could have.
There's no one building.
There's
that
no
houses
one building.
Undocumented immigrants.
That's right.
That you can.
Well, and I mean, if you want to talk about buildings, undocumented immigrants own houses, or in mixed status families. And not just undocumented. I want to say briefly, there's this large population of people who are here legally on something called temporary protected status, which the administration is attempting to withdraw. This is part of the anti-immigrant push. So around 1 million people between dreamers and people on temporary protected status stand to lose their legal ability to be in the United States starting next year. When they walk away from their mortgages, when they walk away from their car loans, that's going to be a big hit to the economy. If you put everybody together, right, all of the immigrants in the country, it's $2 trillion worth of our GDP, right? Immigrants founded, Google and Intel and everything else. There is very little academic research that suggests that undocumented immigrants hurt U.S. workers as a whole. In general, they contribute to the economy.
You say as a whole because there are clearly instances where they do?
Well, in the same way that there are clearly instances where increases in the minimum wage, right, at the margin shift the way employers respond to labor supply. But that's not a reason to be against the minimum wage, right? In the aggregate, there are probably some effects. One study says 0.03% of GDP. Shifting around employment with undocumented labor. But it is a very, to the extent that there's any labor effect, it's very small, and it seems to be well more than offset by taxes people pay that could then fund, social services and readjustment. I mean, one thing to say is undocumented immigrants in general pay into Social Security, don't get anything out of it, pay into Medicare, don't get anything out of it, pay local property taxes, sales taxes, excise taxes. We think it's about $11 billion a year in the federal payroll taxes. It's another about $12 billion a year in the state and local taxes. So that's a lot of money that becomes direct public money in addition to the productivity in the private economy.
So when you make these arguments to folks on the other side, who I'm sure you've spent years talking to, what do they say to that?
On the economic piece in particular, I mean, there are different studies that claim different things. It's sometimes hard to believe that the arguments on the anti-immigration side about the effect on the low-wage workforce are being made in good faith, because they are often coming from groups that are not otherwise very interested in things that would be good for the low-wage workforce, like childcare and family leave and so forth. So, look, I'm not personally an economist. I'm a lawyer. I think there is a lot of dispute on the policy side about what you could do in the low-wage economy. And it may well be that having a better regularized guest worker program, a better way for people who don't have a lot of skills to come to the economy, come to the country, contribute to the economy, and maybe build their skills in a way where it is legal but time limited. There may be a role for more of that in the economy. The comprehensive immigration reform bill that passed the Senate that John Boehner refused to bring up had a big piece of that. That was part of the generational solution to this problem, right? Was regularizing the undocumented population, making it harder for people to work here illegally in the future, and creating a better guest worker program. That three-legged stool is still out there, and that was something that brought people on the right and the left and everywhere together. The only people it didn't bring were the Freedom Caucus, right, who John Boehner was hostage to.
Yeah. We know from kind of the great propagandists of the world that the way you launch a good propaganda campaign is you take a kernel of truth and then you build around it, and you build and build and build, and you convince people of all of these things. In this debate, what is the kernel of truth that this president is clinging to in order to create the kind of atmosphere around this issue? What is he right at? What do you think he's right about when it comes to immigration?
Well, he is right that America has changed. He is right that since the 1960s, America has become less white, right? White birth rates are down. Lots of people have immigrated, and different populations have different birth rates. The research that I've seen is that it is places where the immigrant population is small but has grown, right, or is high in salience, that people get a little bit freaked out. So I think what he's right about is that the marginal voter in Iowa has noticed that Iowa is less white than it was 50 years ago. I think he's right about sociological facts like
but
that.
It's still really white people.
I grew up in Kansas. It's
okay.
Fairly white. But there isn't an underlying economic or security fact that he's right about. There isn't a crisis. Illegal immigration is down from the highest month ever for illegal immigration on the southern border was 200,000 people in 1 month. Typical month now is 20 or 40,000. That was 18 years ago. There is not an influx. There is not a crisis of people. There is not a crime problem. There is not a terrorism problem. There is certainly not a problem of the economy being swamped with people whose labor it can't absorb. There isn't a problem at heart here that is an immigration problem. There may be some social attitude problems.
I see. Well, before we go, I need to ask you about certainly the refugee crisis and the separated children, the unaccompanied minors. What we heard that at least, 2 well-publicized deaths in DHS custody. Give us the latest on what is happening with that issue, which has really receded from the headlines in recent months.
Well, one problem is that the Inspector General's people and the DHS Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties people are on furlough. So they can't prioritize those investigations. I mean, I think some resources are being spent, but in general, they're not out there investigating those cases. Family separation was a very particular policy last spring of deliberately prosecuting people for a minor misdemeanor they wouldn't have been prosecuted for otherwise of crossing the border for the purpose of separating them from their children so that would become a deterrent. That thing ended in July. Children are still sometimes separated from the adults they're with, sometimes because the law requires it, sometimes because there is genuine concern about whether the adult is a risk to them. There is certainly concern that the administration is overusing those classifications, taking very tenuous connections to gangs or something to keep people's children away from them. So we are worried about that. But the bigger problem right now seems to be, as we saw in the deaths of those 2 children, that Border Patrol is not configured and for years has resisted being configured to safely care for the people it encounters, right? The people Border Patrol is encountering, as I've been saying, they are increasingly not working age males. They are women and children together or separately. Who are fleeing from violence and gang problems generally in northern Central America rather than from Mexico, and who, even to hold for 1 or 2 or 3 days, require different resources than a 24-year-old male who expected he might end up.
And that's not what the system is set up for.
It's not what it's set up for. They don't have showers. They don't have clothes. They don't have medicine. And so if they come in, if they get the flu, if they're vomiting over each other, you need basic supplies to clean that up. You need a clean sweatshirt to give the kid. And they don't have that. And that is allowing for health problems and real risks to people. So
and do we know how many unaccompanied minors are still in custody, in DHS custody?
DHS, as far as I know, still doesn't put out real-time numbers on that. They put out things that allow you to kind of back into it a little bit after the fact. But in general, what we're seeing is thousands of children, either part of family groups or unaccompanied, coming every month.
Got it. Scott Shuchart, it's like a shoe and a card, is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. He's excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
I'm Igor Volsky. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. You're watching The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show. giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
The Bill Press Show is everywhere you want to be. I'm Igor Volsky, filling in for Bill Press on this Monday, January 7th, 2019. We're in the 17th day of the government shutdown. Hey, listen, the government might be shut down, but Bill Press Show is streaming. That's right. We'll get into all of it, including the president's new proposal of, hey, listen, it doesn't have to be a concrete wall. We'll do steel. If the Democrats want steel, we'll give them steel. We'll also play some hilarious audio from the Rose Garden and talk about the presidential primary, which has somehow already begun. Elizabeth Warren in the great state of Iowa. This past weekend, she lost her voice, but I thought she was energetic, which bodes well for the very long campaign she's going to be in. We'll get into all of that, but first...
This is the Full Court Press.
Alrighty, just a couple of other stories making news. Igor, have you thought about moving to another country?
Every day.
Yeah, well, you are not alone. You are not alone. Gallup just put out a new poll that says that there is a record number of Americans who want to leave the United States and move to a different country.
Where do they want to go?
Anywhere but here, baby. Anywhere but here. So here's the thing. In previous administrations, like George W. Bush, 11% of Americans wanted to leave the country. Under Barack Obama, 10% wanted to leave the country. Under Donald Trump, 16% of Americans...
Wait, just 16%?
Just 16. Just 16 would like to leave the country. But when you break it down, it really is sort of an age thing. For example, 40% of women younger than 30 would like to leave the United States.
Take me with you. Although I don't know where I would go. I have no idea where I would go. I haven't thought far enough. I would go as far as leave. Where
you go from there?
I mean, clearly can't go to Russia.
Let's talk sports.
Yeah,
I know you don't like. Great. I know you don't like when I talk sports.
Great.
And
we don't talk about the sports.
We don't talk about NFL much, but there were some wild card games over the weekend to figure out who was going to go to the playoffs. Let me just run down a couple of scores. The Colts beat the Texans 21-7. The Cowboys beat the Seahawks 24-22. The Chargers beat the Ravens 23-17, and the defending Super Bowl champions Philadelphia Eagles almost lost to the Chicago Bears. It came down to a last-minute field goal.
Ball is snapped, placed, kicked, and it is no good! No good! It is no good, and the Eagles win!
He missed it!
It is no good!
That was how they called it there in Chicago. I've said this before. One of the most satisfying sounds in all of sports is a football doinking off of the uprights, and it happened twice. He hit the left upright, and then it hit the bottom crossbar, and then it fell down onto the field. It was not good.
Well, I'd say the most satisfying sound in all of sports is sports turning off. Yeah, that's right. Silence.
Next story. Here's something you don't want to do. Do not bring your e-cigarette onto an airplane.
Please don't do that.
Somebody found that out the hard way when they were flying from Las Vegas to Chicago. They brought their e-cigarette onto the plane, and it caused a small fire on board the American Airlines flight. Again, it was leaving Las Vegas and headed to Chicago. They noticed a smell of smoke.
Oh, no.
The electronic cigarette overheated.
How did it even get through security? I mean, I guess it doesn't detect for...
It doesn't detect those things a lot of times. And it was in the passenger's bag. It overheated, started the fire inside the bag. It was quickly contained. Nobody was injured. Everybody's fine. But still, they tell you not to fly with those things for a reason. They do sometimes overheat.
And also, don't smoke e-cigarettes, people. I mean, A, you don't know what's in them.
That's right.
B, they're entirely unregulated.
Sure.
And C, it's just a way for big tobacco to get kids hooked on tobacco again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Public service announcement.
This is the Bill Press Show.
That's right, Bill Press Show on this Monday, January 7th, 2019. I'm Igor Volsky, filling in for Bill Press as we enter day 17 of the government shutdown. Where are we with negotiations? Is the government really going to be closed for months, maybe even years? I have the man who has all of those answers. His name is John Bennett. He's the White House correspondent for Roll Call, of course, rollcall.com, and on Twitter at Bennett John T. What does the T stand for, John?
Thomas.
Thomas. Okay, good to know.
Double apostle.
Oh.
Yeah, look at that.
Look at you. Wow.
Right.
Wow. Has that, you feel propelled your career?
Not at all.
Okay, maybe even in the other direction.
Yeah.
I ask all the time about the initial because I learned that John B. King, who's the former education secretary under President Obama, the second education secretary, the B doesn't stand for anything. Did you know that? Stands for nothing.
Wow.
Yeah,
He just made it up?
Well, I could do the same thing. So my name, Igor Volsky, I don't have a middle name, and usually when you have a middle name, you put X.
Oh, okay.
So do you think Igor X Volsky sounds better than just Igor Volsky?
By the way, you ever notice?
Sure. Absolutely.
We talk often about Harry S. Truman. You know what Harry S. Truman's middle name was? It was just the letter S. In fact, if you see people put Harry S. and then a period next to the S, that's not correct because it's just the letter S. It's not short for anything.
Wow. You learn something every day.
You see? You see, well, I think we're more fact-based with that than the president has been with his border wall arguments. You like that smooth?
I've heard a lot of that. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, very, very smooth transitions. So on Friday, the president held a press conference in the Rose Garden. You were there as one of the reporters assembled to hear it. It was him at the front of the podium with, was it Scalise, McCarthy, the DHS secretary, whose name now escapes me.
Kirstjen Nielsen.
Thank you, Kirstjen Nielsen. Anybody else?
Vice President Pence.
That's right. Of course. How could I forget Vice President Pence?
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
He's got sort of a thing going on now where he just shows up and
he
does
doesn't
not
say anything.
perform
It's like
at
a
all.
thing. It's what he's known for. It's what
he
he's
spoke
become known
briefly.
for.
He spoke very briefly.
Okay,
Yeah, he might have had the shortest set of remarks, and we could see him. We could see Pence. We could see into the Oval before they came out, and Pence was leaned over the Resolute desk and was scribbling on a sheet of paper. So I think he was kind of gaming out his very brief remarks.
He's not a bad communicator. I spent the early part of my career covering healthcare back in 2008 to 2009. And, as you know, he was in the House back then and was one of the public faces of the opposition. And I thought did a fairly nice job in communicating Republican position on that bill. And so I'm a little surprised that he hasn't been used as a communicator, although, of course, the president is his own best strategist and communicator, and so no need for Pence.
I think Pence, not sure if Pence, I don't know if burned feels, I don't know if he feels burned is the right way to put it, but part of the reason for that is A, you're right, the president thinks he's his own best communicator on any issue, and B, Pence went up around Christmas and he proposed just over $2 billion for the border wall to Schumer and $400 million for these other border security things, at least to the extent that we know what they want to spend that money on. Well, now the president has doubled both numbers, so Pence kind of looks,
can't even do his job,
right? And I talked to Democratic sources, Republican sources in the White House didn't really want to bite on this over the weekend, but there is a sense on the Democratic side that we trust Mike Pence to be a negotiator if it was the Pence administration, but the problem here is we're fairly confident he doesn't speak for the president, and we saw that before Christmas.
That's right.
So I think the reason you don't see the vice president out there publicly, and I think the reason we saw him, get up to the podium, thank the president, praise the president, kind of restate what the president had just said, and then get out of there is because he doesn't want to say too much in public and then have the boss contradict him. It happens time and again, not just with the vice president. It happens with Sarah Sanders. It could go on down the list.
Yeah. So take us inside these negotiations that Pence is having with the Democrats. As you say, it's unclear that he speaks for the president. He's been undercut by the president in the past. So what is the purpose of these meetings?
I do think there is a purpose to these meetings. Now, they don't have another scheduled with congressional staff, the vice president, the acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, and Nielsen. That could change at any moment, of course. But what it seems like what they're trying to do, and I'm going to look into this more today, they're trying to put the meat on the bones of the rest of the deal. We'll deal with this border wall, steel slats, funding figure later, but it's not a bad way to do it. And I've seen these deals come together like this in these shutdowns and fiscal cliff crises before. You build, you come to agree on the other stuff you agree on, and that's going to take a while. But you have to agree on that stuff at some point. So there is some merit and some logic in, well, let's build this, be it $400 million or $800 million. I assume it'll be somewhere in the middle, maybe $600 or $550 for these other things, these so-called humanitarian needs, sensors, drones, more border personnel. All that costs money. So let's agree on what we agree on there, lock that in, think we lock that in, and then we have to take it to the president and who knows what they said on Fox the night before that morning could or the next morning will influence that. But that's what they're doing now. They're trying to build the other parts of what will eventually be the agreement, but then they have to get to the border wall number. And we haven't seen any movement from either side on that. And that is the sticking point because Democrats will agree to those other things.
These are technological measures at the border and other border security measures that, except for the wall.
And dealing with things like the migrant children. They want some more money to build housing and I guess some better care, make the process a little more humane. At least that's what the administration's saying. I don't think Democrats are buying it quite yet. They want more justification behind that part. But Democrats do support those kinds of things.
And is the material for the wall, which appears to be the latest development from the president, that fine? They don't want concrete. I'll give them steel. Mick Mulvaney on wherever he was, CNN or something last. Do you have that clip? Saying that if the Democrats, on Meet the Press, saying that if the Democrats don't want concrete, we'll give them steel. Here he is.
We didn't make much progress at the meeting, which was surprising to me. I thought we had come in to talk about terms that we could agree on.
Will that be any kind of game changer now? Okay, we'll do steel?
Well, here's the problem. Anytime in life...
It's stronger,
I had a double take in the Rose Garden when he said that, and I kind of looked down at my phone because you don't want to, you want to keep the poker face, and I just had never really thought about it. And I kind of glanced up, and I had this look on my face, and I locked eyes with him, and I was kind of thinking, I was kind of grinning, like, he's right. It is. He's got a point there. And the vice president kind of saw and kind of smirked back. I don't know if he was thinking the same thing, but it was one of those surreal moments that you have at any White House.
Yes.
I have to say, you got a lot of FaceTime at the Rose Garden. Every camera angle, there was John.
I was
there.
I was beside the more talented and better looking Kevin Corke from Fox and the more talented and better looking Major Garrett from CBS. So
formerly of Fox,
right? So I was right in that line of sight there, and my friends were sending me screenshots all weekend. So
nice.
So that was fun. But I just don't know. The thing is, when you're trying to give someone an out in a work conflict, or you're trying to work something out at work, or with a family member, or your significant other or spouse, and you're trying to give them an out on something, you don't then go on Twitter or go in front of the cameras and say, I'm giving them an out. I'll just call it wink, wink. I'll just call it steel slats or offense. I'm not going to call it.
That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
And the second part of that is then you don't say, I'm giving them an out, wink, wink. I'm going to just call it something else. And then go on Twitter every day and call it a wall. So the president is trying to move a little bit here, but he's yet again undermining his own message about this out. And until he somehow wiggles out of this situation, this particular part of the situation, I'm not sure that Pelosi, Schumer, and company are going to be that impressed that it's steel. But the White House has a point.
He's going with steel.
What are you wearing? Steel.
What we've always wanted.
Yeah. So I don't know how they get to a point to agree on what to call it, because the president keeps going back to Twitter and saying, no, it's a wall. He's talking to his supporters, to his core supporters. It's a wall. Trust me, it's still a wall. That's the part of it that I don't, the funding part and the semantics part on the wall, I still don't see how they get there anytime soon. I have trouble sometimes seeing how they get there ever. But the rest of it, they could, if they got serious about this, if there was some kind of hard deadline, they could get there by lunchtime Wednesday on the rest of it. But this other part, the wall, the steel, the funding amount, boy, I just, it's hard to see how they get there.
That's the thing that's so weird these days with Trump, right? Like, there are so many stories that I think get overblown, and we can see how they're going to play out, right? Like, there was this, I'm old enough to remember when there was reporting done that Nancy Pelosi didn't have the votes to become Speaker of the House. And we sat here on the show, we said, she's going to be Speaker of the House, guys. This is not that hard of an equation. She's going to figure this out. And so, like, that was sort of a non-story for us, right? But ending the shutdown and what will get Donald Trump to actually bend, I don't know what it is. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. It's really going to be a matter of him figuring out a way to make this look like a win for him. And I don't know what that looks like.
Listen, I'm glad it's steel. I just hope it's stainless. So
That's right.
This quote, I think, that we're about to play, Peter, I think is from Sunday when he was either going to Camp David or coming back from Camp David. But this is his effort, John, to rebrand the shutdown because, you know, he's a brander, this guy. Oh, we're gonna wait just a couple of seconds before it comes on. It's a clip that really made me laugh because, you know, he's been trying to refer to it as a strike, right? And so I thought this is what this was, but here this is even funnier.
I'm very proud of doing what I'm doing. I don't call it a shutdown. I call it doing what you have to do for the benefit and for the safety of our country.
That was in the Rose Garden. You were there for that, John.
No, you were there for that. Okay, great. Doing what we have to do for the benefit of this country.
I call it doing what you have to do for the benefit and for the safety of our country.
It doesn't have quite a ring to it.
John, what is it like? You know, it reads one way on television, obviously, but what is it like to actually be at the Rose Garden, to be in those rooms, to take it all in real time from him in person? How do you keep yourself from laughing?
Sure, it can be surreal. You know, you don't laugh too much. You have a job to do. You have to be professional.
You laugh after. That's right.
Well, I mean, but there are moments just because this is an unprecedented presidency, and he wants it to be that way. His approach is so different. The moments where you kind of, I would say, when you're on the job, you're on the clock, you're in a different mindset than when you're sitting around with your friends or something, and talking about it after it's happened. There are moments where I find it's just so eyebrow raising, and it kind of jars you, and it takes a few seconds to kind of recover and process what he's saying. But the thing is, by the time you process, something like the national emergency, for instance, he's on to something else. So you don't have a lot of time in the moments, and it's just the machine gun, the machine gun cadence of some of the claims and the things he says. And there's a lot of, well, why don't you fact check it? Well, that's hard to do on a day like, what was that, Friday?
Yeah,
I mean, they all run together lately. So it is surreal, and I don't want to say that I knew what some of the lawmakers and Vice President Pence and Secretary Nielsen were thinking on Friday when he made some of these claims. But the body language, just go back and look at some of the body language. Nielsen looked down a lot. She was frowning a lot. McCarthy went from, he's kind of a jovial fella. And
seems like a very nice guy.
Yeah. But there were times where he went stone-faced. The Vice President and Congressman, the Minority Whip, Steve Scalise, were also behind the president. And there were times kind of locked eyes with them. And I don't want to say what they're thinking, but they noted some of the things he said too. It definitely registered with them. And Nielsen, at times, looked a bit pained. I don't know if she was cold. It was chilly out there. My fingers I had to write another story after, and my fingers had to thaw before I could do that. So maybe she was just cold.
Only have 9, by the way.
I know. Yeah. So it can be surreal, but you also have to remind yourself that his supporters believe him. They're behind him. They believe this too. And I always try to remember that there are tens of millions of Americans who are with him, and they believe it. So you do have to remind yourself, and I think it's a core part of the job, that a lot of Americans believe there's a big slice of the country that are right with him. So this isn't just, like a far out president. He represents a big part of the country.
To your point, he had on Friday this claim about using military eminent domain. What is that? Does that exist even? And it was so rapid fire, as you say, nobody even asked him about it. But when presidents of years gone by, such a claim would, dominate news and conversations, and here it went unnoticed.
We don't joke about this, but we comment on this in the press area at the White House after one of these press conferences, or he comes out and gives a statement. And what we always say is just that. With any other president, that part would have been the lead every day, and then probably would be writing about that all next week. And a lot of that stuff now, it's just part of your story and you move on.
Yeah.
I think he's conflating two things. He's conflating, because you would have to use eminent domain. They are using eminent domain where they want to build the wall. And he said that. He said Nielsen and her folks at DHS are already doing that. You have to do it. He claims they're being fair, even generous in a lot of cases.
Of course.
I think then national emergency, you can use. He can send the military down to do some more, put fencing and barbed wire up. But you can also, that allows him to at least propose moving around Pentagon money to build the wall. The catch there is, and McCarthy said this as soon as he got back to the Capitol, even if the president does that, even if they send what's called a reprogramming request, and I don't want to put people back to sleep, but that just means take already allocated Defense Department money or within any federal agency's budget, move it around for something else. Congress controls constitutionally the power of the purse strings here. Congress, at least the appropriations committees, have to approve that kind of funding shift.
I see.
So he can declare it. They can come up with plans. They can, they can move forward with, contracting or eminent domain procedures. But Congress would still have to approve the action before the money could actually be available and in a wall account. Congress still has to weigh in. And remember, Democrats control the House Appropriations Committee.
Yeah. So in terms of getting out of this shutdown, in the politics of getting out of this shutdown, you have at least 3 Senate Republicans, Susan Collins, Cory Gardner, and Tom Tillis, saying, come on, Mitch, let's try to get out of this. They're all up in 2020. But is your sense that so long as the base, who you just referenced, is with him and believes him, that it's very hard for Republicans doing a short-term political calculus of, if I go against this president, I'm going to have a primary problem on my hands when I run for president. Yes, I know there's all kinds of long-term problems for the party because of this guy, but my concern right now is the immediate future. Is that the political calculus going on here?
That's exactly the political calculus going. You hit the nail on the head. It's that primary challenge. It's Jeff Flake. It's Bob Corker. We could keep going here. Those guys are no longer in the Senate, largely because they were critical of the president, and that conservative base abandoned them. And they looked at the polling and decided not to run again because they couldn't win.
But in that calculus, right, is the assumption that the base is with Trump, and I, as Cory Gardner or Tom Tillis or, Mitt Romney now, I guess, is kind of doing things, but I can't convince them otherwise, right? That we are in a post-fact world. He can go out there, create his own facts. They'll believe him. I, as a Republican elected leader, can debunk him all I want. It's not going to matter because facts don't matter to my base. How do you, as an elected representative who represents these people live with that fact, right? That facts don't matter.
It comes down to personal survival and their political survival. That's why, in the states you just mentioned, it's interesting. Those are statewide elections. Those aren't deep red states. So it's easy for Tillis and Collins and Gardner to come out and say, well, he needs to compromise. We can get him some wall money, but just compromise. Yesterday, now it's up to 5.7 is what they want for the wall.
Oh, it's growing.
Right. It's growing. It's going in the other direction.
Right.
So it's easy. Those are purple-ish states, so they need to do that. But for others, I think that's exactly right. The calculation is exactly that. I'm not going to convince these people. I had a conversation late last week with someone who watches this stuff fairly closely. Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or George W. Bush had supporters. It's almost like sometimes it feels like Trump has followers.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're going to abandon him as far as supporting him. I think the question here is, and to Peter's question, this will come down to when do the poll numbers for Trump really start to tank here? So he's always around 40% on his approval rating. If that goes down to, say, 35, we're 2 more weeks into this thing. We're at day 37 of the shutdown, and his approval rating is at, 35, 36 in the NBC poll and the Washington Post poll. But when the Fox and the Rasmussen poll, those are usually better for any conservative politician. When those start to dip, and if there is any showing of fraying that the base is starting to feel the effects of this thing, his core supporters, Treasury trying to scramble and say they can get out some tax refunds.
The refunds, yeah.
That's going to be a big test for the president if it goes on that long. If his supporters start to really feel that part of it, and they're not getting their refunds that they budgeted for, and they start to get frustrated. But it's going to have to be some kind of personal effect on Donald Trump, and we see that time and again. He has to feel it. He has to sense that it's going to hurt him and his political future and his reelection. And we could be months away from that. Someone asked me, same conversation late last week, when did I think this breaks? And I said, House votes the Thursday before Easter, Senate votes at 2 a.m. Friday. He signs it, jumps on the helicopter, and goes to Mar-a-Lago for Easter weekend.
We're talking Easter.
When is that, in March? April?
April.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
But, I think that's right, by the way. I don't know what it's going to be what it's going to take to break this. And also, look, there are, 800,000 federal employees who are without a paycheck. Let's just play the law of averages. Some of those people voted for Donald Trump.
Sure, absolutely.
Right? And there's a chance they might not get a paycheck until Easter.
Wow.
I mean, you would imagine that they would be losing their minds.
Wow. But, that appears to be the tipping point in this case in particular of Trump supporters not getting their paychecks, but also with Trump generally, because if the economy in our new year turns down
right.
and goes south,
right.
Trump may start losing some serious support, may start peeling off numbers.
I think that's the one
base,
thing that could actually hurt him.
And then we could see a very different conversation.
I think that's right. I think that's a very good point. If you have these things come together and even, I think 5% of his base 5 to 10% of his base becoming frustrated in the next few months and really feeling the effects of this. And if the economy continues to kind of this teeter-totter, especially with the markets, if the jobs data starts looking bad and the markets come down even more, and the shutdown drags on, people aren't getting their paychecks. There's more and more reports and images on television of a lot of these federal workers live paycheck to paycheck. There is kind of a slow drip that it's going to look bad for President Trump. Democrats aren't going to look great the longer this goes on either. I don't mean to say that. Everyone's going to look bad and worse as this thing drags on. But I think that's what it's going to have to be. Trump is going to have to come up with a calculation that, okay, I dragged this out. I fought for the wall. We've seen Democrats break before. We've seen Schumer and Pelosi give ground before. There's a deal to be had, but it's not going to happen until Trump calculates that, okay, this is now really bad for me.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to get reelected. By the way, the legal protections of the office of the presidency got to be looking pretty attractive. We don't know what Mueller has. The House Democrats are about to dive in on their investigations. My sense is he's going to want to get reelected.
Yeah. But if the economy turns, the prospects of a Republican primary become all the more real.
They do. Whoever that might be, a John Kasich, a Jeff Flake, Senator Mitt Romney,
You think
perhaps.
Mitt Romney again?
But The problem here is the time it takes to get the campaign apparatus in place, to get the funding to take on Trump in a primary challenge. That clock is ticking. The sand is already really through the hourglass here. That takes a long time. You got meetings, you got fundraisers, you got to call people up and beg them for money. It's a huge logistical and monetary challenge, even a primary campaign, just to run in the primary. So if there's going to be a serious primary challenger, I would expect that between, again, now and Easter, because it just takes so much time and effort to have the money to be competitive, to buy the ads, to do all the things you've got to do. You got to buy a bus, you got to buy a plane, or at least charter one. So this takes a long time. But yeah, if the economy were to just take a nosedive, then
he's in trouble.
That might motivate a John Kasich or a Jeff Flake or somebody to jump in.
John Bennett, he's the White House correspondent for Roll Call on Twitter at Bennett John T, and of course online at rollcall.com. John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with the Bill Press Show right after this.
This is the Bill Press Show.
There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children. She didn't know what to do.
Did you have a good day at school?
She gave them some broth without any bread.
There you go.
And kissed them all soundly.
Night night. Good night.
And put them to bed. Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org.
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
It can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down.
It doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G? You all right, girl? You cool?
You bugging dog.
Just show you're there for them.
Go on, Kelly. It's easy awkward.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
Do you want to retire like a champ? Just like legendary basketball star Uncle Drew? Don't do him like that, Uncle Drew! You're already acing the game. You've got your dream ride.
Don't be slamming my door.
Sorry about that.
You just did the same.
Gotta get the boys. Your dream vacation and your dream team. And now you can make your retirement just as legendary.
I get buckets.
Get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes.
Right?
I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know.
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did
This is the Bill Press Show.
That's right, the Bill Press Show on this Monday, January 7th, 2019. I'm still Igor Volsky, still filling in for, I guess, the vacationing Bill Press. And joining me now is Marianne Levine. She's a reporter and co-author of Politico Influence on Twitter at Marianne_Levine and, of course, at Politico.com. Marianne, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Peter, were you going to say something?
Is it Marianne Levine?
Wait, how did I say it? Levine.
Didn't we just go through a whole thing? I was telling you how to say your name, and then you said it wrong.
Don't worry about
You
it.
said Levine multiple times just now.
Oh,
Igor.
no, I thought in my head I was
Here's
saying
the thing, Marianne. You have to understand.
That's
you have to
okay.
understand. Igor has a problem with names.
I really do.
He has a problem with names.
It's a real issue.
And I'm not mocking and making fun. I'm making fun a little bit. I'm making fun a little bit. But as Igor said, English is not your first language, right, Igor?
Third language.
It's your third language.
Russian, Hebrew, English, people.
So there you go. So there you go. You get a little bit of leeway.
You know, here's the other problem is when I think I've recently, by the way, Peter, you'll be interested to know, have diagnosed the origin of this syndrome that I suffer from.
Self-diagnosed. let's just be clear. Let's just be clear. It's self-diagnosed. Yeah.
I really became fascinated with books like in middle school, and I read like a lot of books. And whenever I came across a name I wasn't familiar with, I literally skipped over it. And that has trained my brain to just not remember or really think about names. And so it's true. Peter smirking. Even when I meet people and they tell me their name, I literally hear it and it immediately leaves my head. Like if I didn't know Peter for like 5 or 6 years, I would not remember his name right now. That's just the reality. In fact, I've had people who I've worked with in years gone by who I see again years later. I have no idea who they are. I have people who ask me to write letters of recommendation. I have no idea who these people are. They tell me how closely we work together, no idea who they are. This is a real issue. My life is hard.
Oh, it does sound difficult.
Yes.
It's okay.
Levine.
At least you recognize the
I
issue.
recognize it.
I just want to say, we were just remembering.
Gabe Benedetti. What?
One of my, I was just about to say, one of my favorite memories on the show is the day that we had two journalists, Gabe Benedetti and Matt Vassilagambros.
That I could never do. I could still never do Vassilagambros.
And that was just unfair to you.
That was my fault.
Rude.
He does this to me.
That was my fault.
One of the rules for me to do this show is all of the names have to be simple. But even clearly the simple names, so there's no guarantee.
You nailed our last guest, John Bennett. That's not tough.
Thank you. I nailed it.
That's not tough.
That one's hard to mess up, I think.
But it must not be the only one. I mean, so many people. Levine,
everyone says
Levine.
Levine. I don't even correct people at this point.
Levine. Is it a family? Has it always been Levine in your family?
It's always been Levine, yes. Yeah.
What? Why are you laughing? I thought maybe there was a historical.
We were just laughing.
I was doing the historical version of your name.
Yeah. No. I think that's always been the case.
Ray and I were just laughing about our last guest, who, of course, his name is
John Bennett.
Johan Bennett. Sorry.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, I'll just say to end this hilarity, really, for the listeners, is my name's Igor Volsky. People butcher my name all the time, so I understand the pain. But, they inflict it on me. I turn right back around. I inflict it on them. That's right.
Full circle.
So, Marianne, you took time, as we all did, I'm sure, to watch Nancy Pelosi's speech when she was sworn in as Speaker for the second time. I did not know, by the way, that Tony Bennett rescued concentration camps in World War II. Did you know this?
I did not know that
This
either.
blew my mind.
Yeah, I did not know that either.
Respect, really. For me, that was the most interesting part of the speech. But let's talk about Democrats taking control of the House. Their agenda, certainly right now, they're dealing with the shutdown. They're going to start passing individual appropriation bills to put some more pressure on the White House. But what are their priorities now going into 2019?
Well, as you mentioned, I think the first priority is ending the shutdown. And as the new Congress began last week, it was kind of an awkward start because on the one hand, Democrats were jubilant to finally take back the House, but there was this awkward sort of atmosphere on the first day of the 116th Congress, just given that the shutdown really is kind of looming large and really is
the cloud over everything else.
It's the top priority. And as we saw last week, House Democrats passed a bunch of bills pass legislation to try to reopen the federal government that the Senate has said they will not take up. Because,
even though they passed it before Christmas or before the New Year's.
Correct, because they don't think the president will sign it. So I think the first priority right now is really reopening the government.
And moving on from there and assuming there's going to be some negotiated settlement, hopefully before Easter, although Bennett said to us in the last segment that he doesn't see this resolving itself before like Easter because the president has to have a political win or make it feel like he's actually won. And he feels like that's going to take some time. But once that is actually resolved, the Democrats did campaign on an agenda. They have announced what the first bill is going to be, an anti-corruption bill. They're going to drop a background checks bill on Tuesday. What do you see the pathway for those bills? What does it look like in the House? And then, of course, what happens when it gets to the Senate, which is still controlled by Republicans?
So the bills are essentially symbolic. They're a way for House Democrats to tell the American people, look, you guys put us in office. This is what we're going to do. We're going to crack down on lobbying. We're going to implement all these ethics reforms that they view as long overdue. But many of these bills are dead on arrival in the Senate, which is, as you mentioned, controlled by the Republicans. So they're really symbolic, and they're really a way for Democrats, for them to say, hey, we're trying to address the problems. The Republicans over there in the Senate, they're not going to do anything about this, but we are trying to fulfill the campaign promises we gave, even though these bills are not, especially the ethics bill, those are not probably going to be taken up by the Senate.
But presumably going into an election year, which how are we already back in an election year? I mean, really. This provides what the Democrats are going to be doing. However, symbolically, this provides a fairly clear contrast between what a Democratic lawmaker would do for you, voter, right, and what Republicans are going to be doing. But it feels like that, and we talked about this with Honey a little bit, is there does appear to be a real problem for Republican lawmakers who are, on one hand, have to follow the president because he has the support of their base, but at the same time, they must be concerned about the long-term prospects of the Republican Party and what it's going to mean once Trump is, out of politics one way or another, for their own survival.
Yeah, I think and some of this also depends on what state you're from. Like, I think if you are from a purplish state, you're going to be slightly more critical of the Trump administration, or have a tendency to be slightly more critical of the Trump administration. We've seen that with Susan Collins and Cory Gardner, both of whom have said that they want the Senate to take up the House-passed bills to end the shutdown. But I mean, publicly speaking, Republicans have fallen very much in line with Trump. He has taken over the party in many ways, and I mean, we look at this latest border wall fight, and they are with him on it for the most part.
Yeah.
So it seems like the Republican Party has really become the party of Trump, and you're not seeing that much outward concern from people about that, unless they're departing senators like Senator Bob Corker or Senator Jeff Flake or Governor John Kasich. But aside from that, it does seem like most of the Republicans are with him and are not actually out there vocally expressing concern about the direction of their party.
Well, and part of the reason why Republicans have been with the president was because he has been incredibly successful in pushing through his judicial nominees, which of course changes the course of policy in our country for a long time and will outlive this president and this presidency. It's a promise the president made to conservatives early on, and it's really a promise he's kept.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I think that we're going to see many of the judicial nominees who were not confirmed in this last Senate. The White House is likely going to renominate them in the coming days, likely. And they're very likely to get through. They're even more likely to get through the Republican Senate now because the Republican Senate has 2 more seats. In the last Congress, we saw there were a couple nominations that were controversial, and you were looking at all eyes were on 1 or 2 senators to see how they would end up voting. And in this next Congress, because Republicans have a bigger margin, there's going to probably be even more success in terms of confirming judicial nominees.
Now, you write in a story in Politico titled "Trump's Judicial Nominees Face Setback" that McConnell's winning streak on judicial nominees may be hitting a speed bump. Why?
Well, they hit a speed bump towards the end of the lame duck session because we had about 70 judicial nominees that at the end of the day did not get confirmed by the Senate, and that's because there were a couple roadblocks that were not anticipated. You had the shutdown fight, which could have maybe been anticipated, but nevertheless took up a lot of air. And then you also had Senator Jeff Flake, who basically said as he was leaving the Senate that he was going to block any judicial nominations. He was either going to vote no on the floor or vote no in committee on any judicial nominations until the Senate leadership brought legislation to protect Special Counsel Robert Mueller.
Yes.
So you had this combination of events in which you did not see a ton of judicial nominees get confirmed during the lame duck session. That being said, many of those people will be renominated, and we can likely see the winning streak probably starting up pretty soon, just given that we do have a bigger Republican majority now in the Senate.
And I mean, the truth is, in a divided government, that this is something that Republicans can really get done, right? This just goes through the Senate. It doesn't concern the House, and this will leave a big, bold Trump stamp on our judiciary. Is there numbers of how many is he nominating and getting approved judges at a higher rate than his predecessors? Because it feels like, I mean, every time I turn around, I feel like 80 more nominees have gotten approved, and it makes me feel, oh my goodness, I hope nobody ever sues me.
I think he's been very successful. I'm not completely sure how the ratio compares to previous presidents, but they got 85 nominees through in the last Congress, which is a lot.
Wow.
So they've been pretty successful. And I mean, there were a couple failed nominations or nominations that were controversial, like the nomination of Thomas Farr and Bounds, and those were the two nominees that really, besides Kavanaugh, were controversial, and that the Senate didn't end up holding a final vote on because they knew that they did not have the votes for those nominees. But that being said, it seems like we are moving towards more people being renominated and the federal judiciary becoming more and more conservative.
Yep. Yes, we are. Well, let me ask you, as we, move forward in this new year with divided government, what are you most interested in terms of trends that you're working on, or things that we should be on the lookout for as we enter this new era of Democrats actually having some power?
I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Mueller report and how, if those findings are made public and how Republicans react to those findings. Do they stand behind the president or do they not? Obviously,
and Democrats saying over the weekend that they would turn over the transcripts of congressional testimony to Robert Mueller in case any of the folks who came before the House Intelligence Committee, which is, of course, running its own investigation, in case any of them lied under oath.
Right. And so I think that looking at that dynamic is going to be really interesting. It'll be interesting on the Democratic side to see how, with so many Democrats potentially running in the Senate, how does Schumer kind of keep his caucus together on a range of issues? Do we start seeing calls for impeachment for the president? I think that's another area where we're already seeing some divide among Democrats about when to make those calls. So I think that's a theme that we're going to be seeing. And then in the short term, we're definitely tracking the Barr nomination. He's had some interesting views on the special counsel and what role the special counsel should have. And I think that that's something that we are definitely looking for in the next few weeks.
Well, speaking of the primary in 2020, just because you brought it up, I wasn't even going to say anything. Elizabeth Warren, the second or third Democrat saying they're exploring, right? There's three, I think, right? There's Castro, there's Elizabeth Warren, and there's that guy from West Virginia, whatever his name is, the West Virginia guy.
Richard Ojeda?
Yes.
There's also John Delaney from Maryland, who's he announced like the day after Trump was inaugurated.
Nobody told me.
Yeah, John Delaney is running.
Who is he?
He's a congressman from Maryland.
Oh, do you know him?
I know of him.
Oh.
He literally, honestly, I think it was the day after Trump was inaugurated. He was like, I'm running for president in 2020.
Oh, well, he's really getting out there.
Yeah, you haven't heard of this?
No, I really, now I feel a little embarrassed. But here's Elizabeth Warren in, I'm spitting all over Marianne here. Here's Elizabeth Warren in Iowa. She lost her voice, but I thought she sounded great.
This is an extraordinary moment in American history. It is a moment when our country faces great danger, but it is also a moment when democracy itself is rebuilding, is strengthening.
You know, Hillary Clinton always had cough drops to avoid this situation right here.
Look,
So
if
pro
you're running
tip.
for president, you
tip.
got to be ready to lose your voice.
You got to be ready to lose your voice. So we have, what, 4 people? We counted 4 people running. 4 people running. Okay, I'm just going to write this down for myself. 4 people running. And this morning in the New York Times, Joe Biden is apparently telling advisors he's the only one who can beat Trump. The only one. Only he can do it. Do you expect Biden momentum as we enter 2020? Okay, you look at the polls, and I mean, people like but I don't know that there's like an overwhelming desire for a Joe Biden candidacy, because we know the first 3 or 2 didn't go so well.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too early to say right now who's going to get momentum and who's not.
No, I want you to predict it right now. Who's going to be the nominee, and how's the campaign going to go? And let's just lay it out for people. And
yeah, that way we don't have to read the news.
Right, exactly. They can start paying attention. Wouldn't that be dreamy, though, if you could just do that?
I wouldn't have a job anymore, though, so that would be upsetting. But yeah, no, I think there is some momentum around Joe Biden, because he is, a lot of people do think that he can connect with the same types of voters who voted for Donald Trump, and that he is, he obviously has experience. I know Dianne Feinstein told one of my colleagues last week that her pick for president is Joe Biden, not Kamala Harris, which is a little awkward because they're both from California.
Awkward. That's awkward. Oh my, I missed this.
Yeah, no,
the kind of drama I live for.
But I think that there is there is a view that Joe Biden could in fact win, and he is leading in some of the early polls in Iowa. So I think there is a little bit of momentum around him, but it's not overwhelmingly so. I think right now the field is really open, and no one really knows who is going to emerge.
No, let's dwell on this Feinstein-Harris drama that must be happening behind closed doors. What did she say exactly? That she was basically endorse him, or say that he'd be a good president, or was there pivot?
I think she just said her pick would be Joe Biden.
Okay, well, maybe Peter can find the exact quote, because we really need to dig into what exactly is happening there. Do you expect, and this is something that we spoke with John about as well, is our sense of this, and tell me if you agree, that so long as the economy continues to do well, that Trump will probably have the support of his base, right? The 83% of his base that do support him. But if the economy turns, he's in real trouble. If his base begins to feel real economic consequences of his presidency, then there might be a runway for somebody to challenge him from the Republican side. Do you, in the spirit of predicting everything here on January 7th, do you anticipate a real Republican fight? Do you anticipate a credible Republican candidate jumping into this thing? Because that'd be exciting. That'd be sizzling.
I think it's possible that we will see another Republican candidate jump in, but I think at the end of the day, Trump polls very, very high with primary voters, and I think that's just given the trends of the economy. I mean, we had this last jobs report was pretty strong. So
pretty good job report.
Yeah, pretty good jobs report. So I think that as things stand now, I would expect him to be the Republican nominee. I don't expect there to be any. I mean, it seems like he will definitely be the.
See, the job report is well. The economy is strong. You'll find another job once we predict everything here. Okay, I think Peter might have the answer now. Again, allegedly, Marianne's alleging that Dianne Feinstein, or who knows, she endorsed Joe Biden for president and not Kamala Harris, her fellow senator from California. Woo! Peter, what's the truth?
Okay, so here is the quote. She told reporters, quote, about Joe Biden. I've worked with him. I saw him in action. I saw him as vice president. I saw his growth, his ability, and I saw his humanity. He's an incredible human being, so it's very hard for me, if he runs, to ignore that. She then went on to say, quote, I love Kamala, but this is a different kind of thing.
She said, Kamala, you're not good enough. That's what she said. She said, you're not ready. Oh, my.
I mean, look.
This is a different thing? Really? What is that? If somebody told you, Peter, I love you. It would be great if you could, run MSNBC, but, that's a different kind of job.
I get that, but I also think that, look, in 2020, whoever's running for president for the Democratic nominee is going to. Lord, I'm so upset we took the fainting couch out of there last week.
Where is the fainting
Just last
couch?
week we got rid
right
of the fainting
in that corner.
couch. You could have really used it.
I know. I need it.
What I would say is, I think, and I've said this before, and I'll say it for the next 2 years.
Yes.
Whoever wants to be the Democratic nominee has to say one thing. One thing
What's that?
only.
What's the one thing?
This is why I'm best suited to defeat Donald Trump.
Well, but then they have to answer the why, right?
Well, yes,
Yeah,
obviously,
right,
yes,
okay.
but they have to have an answer for that. They have to have an answer for that question, every
Yes.
single one of them. And I think that a lot of Democrats look at Joe Biden and say, he could very well be the most qualified to beat Donald Trump. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think a lot of Democrats feel that way.
Marianne, what say you?
I would agree with that.
Okay, but here's why I think that it's really silly, as much as I kid about predicting things, on Monday, January 7th, 2019, for us to have any kind of sense about what this race is going to look like or who is going to be able to answer that question of why they can beat Donald Trump. Because I firmly believe in life, as in politics, that people step up into opportunities and grow in those opportunities. So, yes, we've all seen Joe Biden on the national stage. We've seen his presidential campaigns. And we've seen, him serve the country very well, I think, as vice president. And okay, based on those things, we feel that he might run a good campaign, that he could take on Trump. But we don't know about the rest of the field because we haven't seen those candidates act in that arena. And maybe there's somebody or many people, I'm sure, from the 20,000, I hear it's 20,000 now, who are going to be running, who are going to really show parts of themselves that we just haven't seen, and maybe we'll be so impressed by it, which is why, if I were an elected official, I would not answer these kinds of questions because there's just no way of knowing. I mean, we know that in any primary.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, and I think that you don't know who is going to speak that message that
Right.
resonates with
Who's gonna click
different
with
parts
people.
of the base. Yeah, or who's going to click with young voters, or who's going to click with voters of color. I think I don't know. I don't think that candidate obviously has not emerged yet in terms of a front runner.
It could be anyone, I say. It could be anyone. Well, listen, I really appreciate you giving me that Dianne Feinstein Kamala Harris shade because I missed it. I'm now setting Google alerts for myself because I think there must be some back and forth if she's. I love Kamala, but this is different. I mean, really, wow.
A little harsh.
It's a little harsh, right? A little harsh. Marianne Levine, Marianne Levine. She's the reporter and co-author of Politico Influence. She's on Twitter at Marianne_Levine and online, of course, at Politico.com. My name is Igor Volsky. You've been watching The Bill Press Show. Have a good Monday and a great week. I'll see you here next time. Bye-bye.
This is The Bill Press Show.